Well, after today's 4-1 loss against the Nationals in Seattle, the Mariners dropped 2 out of 3 games against the Nationals in this series. They are now 38-41 on the year. They are 5 games back from the final wildcard spot and 10.5 games back from the Texas Rangers in the AL West. And pretty much as good as their pitching staff has been all year, the offense has been pretty much just as bad. The Mariners are currently ranked 2nd in wins above replacement on Fangraphs wins above replacement for pitching as a whole. However, their offense is 26th in batting average. They have the 2nd most strikeouts out of any team in baseball. The Mariners' entire lineup, top to bottom, besides maybe Ty France, is built around walks, strikeouts, and home runs. But when your team is OPSing 24th in the league, on base plus slugging 24th in the league, that's not going to get it done. Mariners' schedule this final week before the All-Star break does not get any easier, as they start a 3-game series against the Rays on Friday in Seattle. They then head to San Francisco to face the Giants for 3 games, and then to Houston for 4 games against the Astros before heading into the All-Star break. The Mariners front office clearly needs to make some moves to bolster this offense after the All-Star break if they want a shot at making the playoffs. On top of these offensive issues that you also have the news that came out recently. Chris Flexen was DFA'd. He wasn't doing much out of the bullpen. Marco Gonzalez is still feeling it in his arm, and he's been shut down for a couple weeks again. Penn Murphy is undergoing season-ending UCL surgery. Taylor Dollard is undergoing season-ending surgery. He was a depth piece in AAA. Add to this that Bryan Woo hasn't thrown more than 57 innings in a year. He got Tommy John surgery before he was drafted by the Mariners in 2021. As I mentioned, he's only pitched 57 innings in a season, which was last year. Bryan Woo's workload is going to get managed at some point this year, which brings up another question. If Marco's not available, if you have to skip a couple of Woo's starts, are you really going to have a Tommy Malone come up and spot start a couple times? And realistically, it's going to be more than just a couple starts that Woo would miss if they're really going to play it safe with his innings limit. They might even need to pull him out of the rotation and put him in the bullpen at some point to really get that job done. So with all of these concerns compiling, the real question becomes if the Mariners will be able to pull themselves out of this hole that they've dug themselves into. So before we get into some potential solutions or decisions that the Mariners might face, we just need to take a step back and look to opening day. When we were heading into opening day, were you excited about this Mariners roster? Beginning with the starting pitching, you have Luis Castillo on the mound as your ace, the Rock. He was signed to that contract extension last year, which was a great move. You have Robbie Ray as the number 2. This spring training, he looked like his Cy Young self before he got hurt in his first start back. Logan Gilbert was bound to take a step up. You have George Kirby for a full year this year, who I believe was the best pitcher in baseball since like July of last year. And then you had Marco Gonzalez and a few wild cards. You didn't know when you would see Bryce Miller come up or Bryan Woo, maybe Emerson Hancock. But now getting into the lineup, if you told me on opening day that you weren't excited to see this offense go to bat every day, then I'm sorry, but I would have to call your bluff on that. The addition of Colton Wong in exchange for Jesse Winker and Abraham Toro. Colton Wong was coming off of a season to where he was about 17% above average with his bat. He had back-to-back Gold Glove years at second base for the Cardinals a few years back. Then you got the addition of Teoscar Hernandez this offseason to add to your lineup. His bat was about 30% better than league average last year. My point being in this is that you can scream and shout to the front office that they needed to sign a big free agent contract to someone. Trey Turner's 11% under league average with his bat right now. JP Crawford is 8% above league average with his bat technically. So the Mariners were in a good starting spot at the beginning of the year. Now they are not in a good spot, and it's time to find a solution to that problem. The Major League Baseball trade deadline is on August 2nd, so there is some time before you have to make the real big decisions on whether you're going to buy or if you're going to sell. But the biggest impact you can have on your roster in a short period of time is realistically through the trade market rather than going into your minor league system. As far as the pitching is concerned, you should be able to take care of that issue with your farm system. Although realistically for the starting rotation, there's really only one other guy down there that you would realistically be able to put in that spot, which is Emerson Hancock. You've got Prelander Baroa potentially for the bullpen, but the real gap is going to be in the starting rotation. Again, this is due to having to limit Bryan Woo's innings at some point. And if Marco Gonzalez bounces back quicker than expected, then that helps that problem right there. That being said, the biggest need for the Mariners is, of course, one big impact bat. Potentially 2 are needed. Major League Baseball has been pretty wild this year because there's a few teams that have been overperforming by quite a bit. There's also a few teams that have been underperforming by quite a bit. And those teams that are severely underperforming are the ones that you'd be looking at as a potential trade partner. Because ideally the Mariners are buyers, but there are some potential win-win solutions in trades to where, you know, there are 2 teams that are in contention. They just have a trade with each other to where it fits and fills holes for both teams. So looking at the standings currently, there's a few teams that might be a realistic trade partner. One is the St. Louis Cardinals. There's been rumors circulating that the Cardinals and the Mariners have had talks in the past year or so about exchanging young pitching from the Mariners in exchange for young controllable bats from the Cardinals. The name that I saw leaving the Cardinals was Brendan Donovan, who's a 26-year-old outfielder slash infield utility guy. Currently for the Cardinals, he's got a .269 batting average, 7 home runs, a few stolen bases, an OPS plus of 106, so just above league average with the bat. But if you're really trying to make a splash and you're a trade partner with the Cardinals, clearly the most impactful bat you can add from the Cardinals is Paul Goldschmidt. Goldschmidt is yet again raking this year. He's got a .283 batting average, 13 home runs, 40 RBIs. He's got an OPS plus of 133, so about 33% above league average. Goldschmidt is under contract through this year and next year. He's 35 years old, so at the end of that contract, he'd be heading into his age 37 season. The other big splash candidate on the Cardinals is, of course, Nolan Arenado. His bat's been about 15% above league average this year, and he's, of course, an elite third baseman. He's signed through 2027. Eugenio Suarez for the Mariners is currently signed through 2024. Now, if you were to make one of those trades, then you're giving up major league talent for major league talent. The Cardinals want young controllable arms. Well, you've got a Bryce Miller, you've got Brian Wu. It would absolutely pain me to see it, but if a guy like a Logan Gilbert or George Kirby were looped in to get both of Goldschmidt and Arenado, one of those guys is realistically the cost of doing something like this if you're trying to make an impact on your major league roster today. And as painful as it would be at moving any of those guys in the rotation, you have to consider that Robbie Ray is going to be coming back at some point next year. You're paying him a crap ton of money, so he's going to be pitching in your rotation no matter what. You got Marco Gonzalez for one more year, and if everyone was healthy right now, there would be 1 or 2 odd men out. The Mets and Padres are 2 other teams that are underperforming in the National League. Although looking at their rosters and the contracts, there aren't really any guys that are performing too well to where it doesn't really line up with contracts and ages, that type of thing. So I don't think either of those teams are a trade partner. Although Blake Snell for the Padres is having a great year, I just don't know how realistic it would be to trade for Snell at this point. He's only signed through the remainder of this year, so I don't know if giving up young controllable talent would be worth that. Although he is a Seattle native and a free agent after this season, so maybe as a free agent. The most interesting team really is the Chicago White Sox. They're currently 9.5 games back at the final wildcard spot, 5.5 games back in their division. And these were some names that were floated around earlier in the year as soon as Robbie Ray got injured. The 2 bats from the White Sox would be Luis Robert and Eloy Jimenez. A couple arms from the White Sox are Lucas Giolito and Lance Lynn. Luis Robert is OPSing about 37% above league average, Eloy Jimenez about 6% above league average this year. Luis Robert is signed through 2025 with a couple club options, Eloy Jimenez through 2024 with a couple club options. And then those 2 arms that I mentioned for the White Sox, Lucas Giolito, he's having a solid year, a 3.41 ERA, a 1.202 whip, 9.6 strikeouts per 9, and 2.8 walks per 9. He's under contract just through this year. Lance Lynn is also signed through this year with a team option in 24. Although his surface level numbers are not as good, as he has a 6.4 ERA, a 1.489 whip. But adding one of those veteran arms could bolster up your starting rotation if there were any concerns with the Brian Wu or with bringing up Emerson Hancock and relying on him to perform. I'll also remind you that the Mariners have 3 picks in the top 30 next week in the MLB draft. They have the 22nd, the 29th, and the 30th overall pick. I'm going to be doing a Mariners draft preview at some point either this weekend or next week, but this is a potential option for if the Mariners did want to dig from their farm system and trade some of their top prospects in order to get young controllable bats to add to their rotation for the foreseeable future. They could then bolster with more young starting pitchers through the draft or fill in with other positions. So clearly we are no longer early on in the season. After Saturday's game, we will be at the halfway point officially. Clearly it will be an uphill battle the rest of the way, but the Mariners still do have a shot to make a run for that last wildcard spot at some point this year. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below on what the Mariners should do, what your thoughts on the season so far is. I know there's a lot of frustrated fans out there, myself included. I can't even watch every game sometimes just because mentally I need to take a break. And let me know if you'll be in Seattle for the Rays series this weekend. I will be up there, so you might see me walking around the bullpen area before the game. And I'm going to be officially launching the Couch GM podcast this Sunday. I'll be dropping an episode every week, every Sunday. This week will be a solo episode with just myself, but I'll have various guests on to tell their story and to talk baseball, so it'll be a good time. Thanks again for your support, and we'll see you next time.
All right, guys, goodbye, Sunday. Don't forget it.